Good morning. Today's vlog should not even be starting for at least another hour. Definitely shouldn't have started half an hour ago. This morning I'm in London for a screen test, which in the TV world I suppose is a bit weird. It's a bit like a weird job interview, but instead of just going to sit at a desk and have a chat, they actually put you in front of the cameras and sort of get you doing the job to see, you know, how you do it, how well you do it, whether you do it well on camera, whether you look good on camera, whether you work well with your fellow presenters. So it's a slightly strange thing to go through all of that before then deciding whether you've got the job or not. But that's how it works, and that is what I'm doing today. Not bad for a Kia, huh? So, screen test I think went well, as well as I think it could have gone, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. I'll keep you posted, of course. But what we were working with today was classic cars. I can't tell you too much more, and I certainly couldn't film while we were in there, which is such a shame because we were working with some absolutely stunning, beautiful classic cars in there today. And it really got me into and thinking about how beautiful the design of old classic cars used to be and how we miss that in the modern era. And then that got me thinking to the same thing about racing cars and Formula One cars. We just don't have the same beautiful design lines on these cars that we once had, because we're now pushing the limits of efficiency and performance. But those things by far take precedence over what might look stunning and beautiful, which is what used to count more. And that got me thinking, is there anything we could do about that? Is there a way that we could force Formula One teams into designing or running beautiful looking cars over and above cars that are solely functional? The answer is probably no, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but I wondered, for example, you know, I think there's a couple of ways. What about if we went along the route of sort of what Formula E have done in designing this stunning new Formula E car that was unveiled last week that every team has to use? So the aerodynamic package is set and designed by an independent outlet like the FIA and mandated to use by all teams. It takes the aerodynamic race out of Formula One and puts that race much more into the technology of like engines, for example, and gearboxes and hybrid systems and other areas that perhaps might be more beneficial to the road car industry. What about if we were to specify in the regulations a set coefficient of drag that every Formula One car has to adhere to? Now that might sound quite complicated and difficult to work out, but every single Formula One team knows the coefficient of drag of their own car. It's one of the first things that they measure when they put the model car in a wind tunnel, even on the CFD systems that they all operate now. So everyone knows that figure. It can be proved, it can be measured, just like you can measure other things like the flexibility of wings and that kind of stuff. Could we make that one of the enforceable items on a Formula One car? And what we do by doing that potentially is take away or minimise the impact of these complex, often hideous aerodynamic structures that we've seen. I guess my worry, and one of the things that is almost inevitable in all walks of Formula One, is that teams will still push whatever limits we give them. They'll still push them to and above and beyond those limits to try and find any performance advantage that they can. And it may well be that even within a set coefficient of drag, even if that figure is much lower than is ultimately achievable, that teams are trying to find loopholes and maximise loopholes that are within those regulations. So maybe you still end up with ugly parts of the car because teams have found a way to get a tiny little bit more aero performance out of those parts. Ultimately, if you want a Formula One car to look as beautiful and as stunning as they used to do back in the 60s and 70s at times, you know, you need to take away the absolute reliance on aerodynamic performance. So do the regulations need to somehow sway towards that? where it's not aero performance which is the biggest differentiator. Perhaps we could limit the number of aerodynamic updates or changes that a team could make each season. I know that doesn't necessarily guarantee you beautiful looking Formula 1 cars, but perhaps it stops the teams constantly pushing for the tiny elements and the flick-ups and the little flips and flaps and wings and winglets that we see sprouting out of Formula 1 cars almost weekly. Here's a crazy idea. What about if there were points, or a point, awarded to the most beautiful looking Formula 1 car at each event? Voted for by all the other teams, or voted for by an independent panel of journalists, or even better, voted for by the fans of Formula 1. What about if we get somebody like Adrian Newey designing the aerodynamic regs for Formula 1? If we've got somebody as clever as him, as knowledgeable as him, and as experienced as him, creating the loopholes that inevitably will be exploited by the teams, perhaps we can control or at least have some sort of influence over the loopholes and how they will be exploited by the teams before those loopholes even exist. And perhaps by doing that we can shape the regulations and almost force the designers into an area that we know will end up having some, at least, form of beauty as well as aerodynamic performance. Either way, I may well be just hankering back to a time that we can no longer keep hold of, you know, perhaps the 60s and the 70s and those days of beautiful cars both on the roads and on the racetrack. Maybe they're just long gone. But what I've seen today in the classic road cars that I've been working with, and what I saw last week in the unveiling of a spectacular new Formula E car, gives me the tiniest little glimmer of hope that we could actually have beautiful cars racing around our tracks as well as fast cars. Why not? Anyway, those are just some of my ideas, and I'm literally just thinking out loud here with this. I haven't put a huge amount of thought into it, as some of you, I'm sure, will point out in the comments. But as ever, what I would really love is to hear your thoughts on it. I'd love to know what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm just talking utter nonsense? And if you do kind of agree with me, if you think we should be getting back to some more beautiful looking Formula 1 cars, how do we do that? What should we do? What should be longer term? How should Formula 1 be thinking? Do you love the Formula 1 cars we got? Do you think they're beautiful enough? Let me know. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I will see you next time.